Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
A small accident being cleared. It's on the off-ramp from westbound SR 201 at 3200 West on the right. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather partly cloudy today with a high of 64, then sunny and warmer through the rest of the week. Right now, partly cloudy and 61. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM at KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
For the first time in history, the House of Representatives removed a speaker, Kevin McCarthy, yesterday. It all happened within a matter of hours. But now that the dust has settled just a little bit, it's time to think again and maybe think a little different about what happened, what didn't happen, where we are, and more importantly, what comes next. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we try to just debrief a little bit, exhale from the flurry of activity that took place yesterday in the House of Representatives, it's important to keep everything in proper perspective. A lot of headlines, a lot of instant certainty, a lot of rushes to judgment, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of placing blame. Who's at fault? Who's responsible? Who's mess? Who needs to clean up? All of those things were being spewed about both on Capitol Hill and throughout the media yesterday. So we want to back it up just a little bit because I think in the midst of all of that flurry, we missed a lot of the real crucial conversations in terms of what did and did not happen, how it happened, and who stood up for the right principles at the right time. And it's not always who you think. So we want to dig into that just a little bit as we begin the program today to just take a look at how did this really all play out. Now, of course, one of the big think again moments is most of the headlines included something to the effect that Republicans oust their own speaker or Republicans take out Kevin McCarthy. And while it was Representative Matt Gaetz, a Republican, who lit the fuse, there was also an interesting counterplayer there, and that was the entirety of the Democratic caucus. Now, not pointing fingers or placing blame, I just want you to make sure you understand what actually happened and how this will actually look in the history book, not on your favorite website. So in the history book, it will read that for the first time in history, the House of Representatives removed a speaker. The vote to remove the speaker included 208 Democrats and 8 Republicans. History will say that 208 Democrats voted to remove Speaker McCarthy, and 8 Republicans joined them to make that a reality. Now, there were many on the Democratic side of the aisle who jumped in and said, no, we're just for Hakeem Jeffries. That's who we'll vote for Speaker. But one of the things that nobody is differentiating is those are two different things. And I agree with the Democrats. They all should vote for Hakeem Jeffries because he's their leader and that's who they want to be Speaker of the House. What occurred yesterday was not that. It was not a vote for who should be Speaker of the House. It was a specific vote, an intentional vote, to remove the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Now, we'll come back to that in a minute because, again, I'm not saying this is the Democrats' fault, although the Democrats had an opportunity for a profile encourage moment that didn't happen. The Republicans, of course, on the other hand, is just a lot of disarray, where a lot of this chaos began. And the one person who I think actually got to the right principles yesterday in the midst of it all was actually Kevin McCarthy. Now, I have been quite vocal. I have disagreed with Speaker McCarthy on a host of policies, a host of processes and principles and approaches to leading the House of Representatives. But I think when it came to the end, I think he stood on the right principles, and those are worth noting, whether you are a Democrat, Republican, or anything in between. So let's start with some of the conversation that took place. Kevin McCarthy stood in front of reporters last night after having been removed, voted out as Speaker of the House. Here's where he began.
Doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it is necessary. I don't regret standing up for choosing governance over grievance. It is my responsibility. It is my job. I do not regret negotiating. Our government is designed to find compromise. I don't regret my efforts to build coalitions and find solutions. I was raised to solve problems, not create them.
So that's where Kevin McCarthy began. I think those are a pretty good list of things we should be looking for in a Speaker of the House, regardless of political party. McCarthy also talked about, I think, some of the most important things in terms of his concern about the institution of the House.
My fear is the institution fell today because you can't do the job if 8 people, you have 94% of, or 96% of your entire conference, but 8 people can partner with the whole other side. How do you govern? And for them to make a motion on me because I made a decision for the country that they agreed with, but they choose to do the other, that becomes a problem.
So that is part of the problem. If you do the right thing, as the Speaker pointed out, to keep the government open, to fund and to pay our troops, and everyone on the other side agrees with you and actually vote with you, and then for that very reason they turn around and vote you out, that's pure politics. That's not governance. And I think that's part of what Speaker McCarthy was talking about yesterday was, are we just going to do politics or are we going to do policy and governing? Because they're very, very different things. And what we have to remember is that we elect these people to do governance. We do not elect them to do politics. Politics is part of it, but it is not the job. The job is to govern. And if we so buy into the fact that they have to do politics 24/7, that's what we're going to continue to get. And that's exactly what we saw. We called it out yesterday that Matt Gaetz, in the midst of doing business on the floor of the House of Representatives, sent out a fundraising email based on the fact that he was taking down the Speaker of the House. That's not governing. That's not what leadership looks like. And the fact that many bought into that is part of the problem. Now, one of the most disappointing things to me in all of that took place yesterday was the fact that there weren't enough members of Congress that could come together and do the right thing for the institution. Because we've really narrowed this all down to a zero-sum game. I win, you lose. You win, I lose. And we're stuck in that. And you can't govern from that position, especially when you have a very closely divided House of Representatives. You have to build coalitions. You have to have conversations. You have to reach across. It is by design. It's not easy. It's not without risk, as Speaker McCarthy learned. But we have to create space for that to be okay and for that to be able to happen. So I was disappointed that the Democrats, even the Democrats who were in the Problem Solver Caucus, which is 32 Republicans, 32 Democrats, who have come together to have all kinds of wonderful conversations about good policy, good governance. And yet when they met early yesterday morning, the Democratic members of the Problem Solver Caucus, who surely could have stepped in and voted present, they could have voted to retain the Speaker, but they said they needed to remain lockstep with the Democratic leadership and Hakeem Jeffries. Now, that's their prerogative, but that's politics. This is supposed to be about good governance. And so to me, one of the big blows yesterday was the Problem Solver Caucus that I think is designed for just such moments as we saw yesterday, where the extremes were playing the politics of it all. They weren't able to step in because of the politics of it all. And to me, that's the big miss of the day. And so there's plenty of blame to go around, and it goes all the way around. the most important thing and the message that I think was lost everywhere was who was watching out for the institution. Who was willing to say, I'm willing to lose my job to do the right thing for the people I represent and for the country I serve. And we don't have nearly enough in our nation's capital who are willing to ask the right question. Not what's best for me, not what's best for my political party, not what is best for my social media accounts, not what is best for my campaign coffers and fundraising activities, not what's best for my own political power and future, but what's best for the country, what's best for the citizens that I am sent here to actually serve. So yesterday was really a demonstration of how Washington is focused on all the wrong questions. And when you start with the wrong question, you never get to the right answer.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Here's one part of life that doesn't need pumpkin spice.
Pumpkin spice has quite a powerful political lobby.
Breaking news and fall weather updates are all the spice you need. Start with Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda from 5 to 9.
Good morning.
Then David Dujanovic, Boyd Matheson, and Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News as you drive home. News, analysis, variety. The spice of life.
So good.
On KSL News Radio.
I lost 34 pounds on the SOTA weight loss program, but that's not what I want to tell you about. I want to tell you that I gained 4 pounds and I just brought that back down. This is the thing I've never done before, Tim. I've lost a lot of weight several times in my life. But when I started gaining, which, you get stressful or you have birthdays and you just want, everybody does. You wind up gaining a few pounds. I would just keep on going. But with SOTA, I talked to my nutritionist on the phone. She gets me back on the right track. I checked in with her a week ago and just said, I'm back down to where I need to be. And she gives me encouragement. It's wonderful.
That maintenance phase doesn't cost you any extra money on the SOTA weight loss plan. You can stay on it for as long as you need to or want to with that extra added bit of support. But you're right. They know you're going to gain back a pound or two here and there. And what they're training you to do is figure out how to get right back on track. Their goal is the same as yours, to keep that weight off. So find out more. Go to SOTAweightloss.com, spelled SOTA. Think Tim and Amanda. It's state of the art.
At SimpliSafe, we've designed award-winning home security with advanced sensors, HD cameras, and now this, 24/7 LifeGuard protection, only from SimpliSafe. Now, monitoring agents can see and speak to intruders through our new indoor camera to help stop crime in real time and for fast police response. Get 20% off any new system with Fast Protect monitoring at simplisafe.com/radio. Advanced home security, 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. There's no safe like SimpliSafe.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Home is your sanctuary, or is it? If you're tired of yard work, too much space to clean over multiple levels, listen up. Start enjoying home a little more with Nielsen Homes' newest single-level townhomes. Move-in ready without the thought of tedious yard work and close to all the things you love and enjoy. Nielsen Homes offers spacious single-level open floor plans without stairs or yard work and a lower 5.5% interest rate. Nielsen Homes has been building homes across the Wasatch Front for over 45 years. They understand all stages of life and build homes to accommodate the things you need, paired with things you love. See their newest single-level living community in Davis and Weber County, close to golf, pickleball, and more. It's low-maintenance luxury single-level living. No stairs, no more lawnmowers, no yard work, no waiting, and no high interest rates. Visit Nielsen Homes Communities at nielsenhomes.com. Call 385-389-1160. Online at nilsonhomes.com.
Held over due to popular demand. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to save 40 to 80% on a hot tub and swim spa. This weekend only, Friday through Sunday, Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Be advised, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to save 40 to 80% on a hot tub and swim spa this weekend only, Friday through Sunday, Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. 18-month interest-free financing. Our factories have demanded we sell 1,000 hot tubs and swim spas this weekend. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Huge factory incentives, factory rebates, this weekend only. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. We can remove your old hot tub. Free delivery of your new hot tub. Hot tub starting at $2,999. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Free delivery of your new hot tub. Just relax and enjoy. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Friday, noon to 8 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Free admission, free parking, free delivery. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Call 888-SPA-SALE or visit hottubandSwimSpaSale.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomis. First, a woman in Vernal was accused of hitting a police officer with her car as she tried to leave the scene of a domestic disturbance. Second, Utah was short one Republican vote in the House with the 2nd District seat vacant, but former Congressman Chris Stewart says wouldn't have made much difference in yesterday's vote to fire Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And third, President Biden says McCarthy didn't talk with him in the final hours of last week's negotiations on a federal spending bill. Right now, 61 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
We're going to stay with the conversation just a little bit longer. We've gone into some of the ins and outs of what did and what did not actually happen yesterday as the vote to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House took place. And now we want to project forward just a little bit, looking at what does this actually mean for the institution and really what does it mean politically rolling into 2024. And remember, we're always separating that out. Good governance and politics, we're going to put those two things in separate spaces for our conversations today. But we want to dig into one that's really important. David Drucker, of course, joins us from the Dispatch. And David, you guys really carved out some great insight overnight as it relates to what comes next. But I want to start with this first element you had in there, was that the fact that Speaker McCarthy was ousted was really some of the things that he did by sacrificing a lot of the institutional power of the office in order to get the office.
Yeah, Boyd, he agreed to a rules package. If people don't recall, at the beginning of this Congress in January, after the Congress was sworn in, and I know a lot of people will remember those 15 rounds of votes, because when you elect a Speaker of the House, it's done on the floor by a voice vote, a roll call vote, where everybody gets a vote. And so obviously it took the Speaker 15 rounds to get that, the now former Speaker 15 rounds to finally get 218 votes. What was overshadowed in all of that is one of the deals he made with members of the right flank of his conference, or in order to finally secure those remaining votes, was that there would be a new rules package governing how the House functions that allowed just one member of the House, of the Republican conference, to bring forth what we're calling a motion to vacate, essentially to force a vote to oust the Speaker. In past Congresses, for both Democrats and Republicans, it took several members in order to force this sort of a vote. And so you'd have to really have, if not a majority of the majority, you'd at least have to have some sort of consensus on a large group of members who were unhappy with the Speaker's leadership and wanted to force such a vote. Here, it just took one. That's all it took. And, of course, with a 4-seat majority, which is really not a governing majority at all, with a 4-seat majority, McCarthy lost 8 votes out of 200 and something, but that was enough to kill his speakership.
Yeah, and looking at that, and obviously that rightward flank of the Republican Party clearly had the pull, knowing they had that power that the Speaker had abdicated in order to become the Speaker. To me, this is always part of that. Never underestimate the Republicans' ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They seem to have done that for another round. And so as you look at it from the politics side of it and projecting forward towards 2024, clearly this hurts Republicans in one area that you guys mentioned at the Dispatch that no one's been talking about, and that is Kevin McCarthy was a big fundraiser and part of a real machine that suddenly is going to be coasting or the brakes will have been slammed and airbags deployed for a little while. That can't be helpful to them.
Well, anytime you commit an unforced error when you're fighting to grow a slim majority, defend it and grow it, it's problematic. The one thing Republicans have going for them is that the election is more than a year away. So there's plenty of time for the Democrats to make mistakes and people to focus on a general election and President Joe Biden and whatever they think of him and whoever the Republican nominee is going to be. Looks like Donald Trump, but we don't know for sure. And those things will really overshadow, because it's a presidential cycle, the race for the House, for control of the House of Representatives. However, I do think when you look at the political machine that Kevin McCarthy has built and the fact that he's been raising not just a lot of money, we say this one's a solid fundraiser, this one raises money. He's been raising record amounts of money, just lapping all of his predecessors. And, money's not everything, but it is important. And so all of that now is going to have to be figured out. The eventual replacement, depending on who it is, may be able to pick up the slack or sort of fill McCarthy's shoes, or may not. And that's something Republicans are going to have to contend with. I think the larger issue they have to contend with, though, Boyd, is regardless of who they choose, they're still going to be stuck with a 4-seat majority. That means the right flank or any number of members that are unhappy with anything can bring the business of the House to a grinding halt, can make threats. And so unless House Republicans use this situation to take stock of the rules and consider whether or not they want to govern in divided government, and whether they're willing, you don't have to say out front, of course, I'm going to compromise and here's where I'm going to, here's what I'm going to give up. But, in divided government, you can drive a really hard bargain. But eventually, if you have a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, you're going to have to reach a deal with the other side. And unless they're willing to give their new speaker leeway to do that, they're just going to be mired in this doom cycle over and over again. Now, and eventually, they can't clean that all up. Voters may go to the voting booth, and regardless of who they vote for president, they might just decide to, give Democrats another crack at the House, thinking maybe these guys can govern. Maybe they'll be able to cut deals with whoever the president is.
Yeah, and so as you look at how that plays out and what really comes next as you start into that whole process, I do think it's interesting that the new speaker is going to be less than 40 days before another potential government showdown begins. And so they're almost going to have to begin from a point of figuring out a compromise that will both appease those who elected them and also deal with the slim majority in the House and the Democratic majority in the Senate.
That and the fact that Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, and President Biden, having just watched what House Republicans went through because Kevin McCarthy couldn't get 218 Republican votes for basically anything, so he eventually just puts a continuing resolution on the floor that requires 200 Democratic votes, and it gets across the finish line. They're looking at this, and they're going to try and drive an even harder bargain, thinking maybe they'll just be another crack up, and we can get more of what we want. So, if Republicans want to achieve incremental conservative reforms or legislation, which is all that's possible when you have a 4-seat majority and you don't control the Senate or the White House, then they're going to have to unify and allow their speaker room to negotiate. It's something that they allowed Kevin McCarthy to do with the debt ceiling deal, and which was really a rather marvelous piece of work on his part because he had 218 Republican votes. And, of course, then there was a lot of blowback in conservative media, among the activists, among the former president, saying, oh, they got rolled. Why did they do this? So the right flank then flees from the deal that was supposed to govern the spending and the government funding to come. Speaker McCarthy no longer has any leverage, and Republicans wonder why they end up with nothing. So we'll see if again, this whole experience forces some changes, and if they give their new leader, whoever it's going to be, the leeway to negotiate and govern.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Great insight, as always. David Drucker, senior writer at The Dispatch. David, always appreciate your perspective. Thanks for joining us today.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right, again, that's David Drucker from the Dispatch, and there are so many interesting things that are flying around, and the stuff on social media and even on our own text line. You always get the people who will call me out for being a right-wing political spinner, and those who will call me out to be a left-wing political spinner. And the only thing I'm asking people to look at today is what questions were people asking yesterday when this all went down. Clearly, on the Republican side, Matt Gaetz is not only doing things that are completely disruptive and causing chaos. He's also raising money off of it, asking for donations in the middle of what was taking place on the floor of the House. That's wrong. And so many just were not asking the right question. And so that's my question to all of us, is can we get to the right question about governing? I get politics, and I get that politics are part of the process. It's part of the debate. But when we make politics the debate rather than governing how we govern the debate, we always end up at the wrong space. And so let's start from the right place, which is how are we going to govern the country? And let's debate that instead. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomis. KSL's top local story this hour. A new nonprofit launching an initiative to conserve water and grow the flow into the still struggling Great Salt Lake. BYU aquatic ecology professor Ben Abbott says in spite of the good water year, the Great Salt Lake is still on the brink of collapse, similar to what we've seen at other salt lakes around the world.
We're already seeing these really negative impacts: degraded air quality, collapsing food web, diseased birds, loss of industrial capacity from mineral extraction.
However, Abbott says every Utahn can help the lake by using less water, keeping reservoirs high. The group's goal is for Utahns to restore the Great Salt Lake within the next decade. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. President Biden is urging Congress to move quickly now on a new bill to fund the federal government in spite of the ouster of former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy by members of his own party. At the White House, the president said lawmakers have a lot of work to do on a new deal.
We cannot and should not again be faced with an 11th hour decision on brinksmanship that threatens to shut down the government.
The hardline Republicans who pushed to remove Speaker McCarthy said he had broken promises he made to them about spending cuts as part of the temporary funding bill. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average are up on the day now, 96 points. And the NASDAQ up even higher, 172 points right now. And our KSL weather, the rain's done. Look for sunshine through the rest of the week. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
Remember that first paycheck when you started working all those years ago? You looked at the net amount and thought, whoa, what happened here? Ah, the joy of taxes. It could be this way with your retirement accounts. You know how much you've saved, but if you haven't planned for Uncle Sam, you could come up short in retirement. With tax laws constantly changing, there's a lot you need to know to make sure you're not paying more than your fair share. Mike Stevens and the team at Capital Wealth Advisors can help you create a plan that shows you how taxes could affect you now and in the future. Set up your tax strategy session with Mike Stevens and Capital Wealth Advisors now. Call 801-210-5500. That's 801-210-5500. Make sure you know how these changes could affect you so you can avoid some of those whoa moments in retirement. Call 801-210-5500. Advisory services offered through Capital Wealth Advisors, LLC, a state of Utah registered investment advisor. Firm may not give tax advice.
Imagine how inconvenient your life would be without power. No lights, no refrigeration, no heating or cooling, and no electronics. But with a Generac home standby generator, you'll have the power when you need it most. Generac generators automatically provide backup after sensing a power outage, so your life goes on uninterrupted. Schedule a free quote today with Genco Generators, your premier Generac service dealer in Utah. Call 801-295-0872 or online at gencogenerators.net.
Heart failure, carpal tunnel syndrome, shortness of breath, stomach issues, lower back pain. How does it all add up? If you have heart failure and any of those seemingly unrelated symptoms sound familiar, It's time to talk with your cardiologist and get the full picture. They may add up to transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy. ATTR-CM is a rare and underdiagnosed disease. Recognize the signs and discuss them with your doctor soon. Learn more at connectwithyourheart.com. That's connectwithyourheart.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Advanced Window Products. From their factory to your front door in 8 weeks. Affordable windows guaranteed. 801-850-9100 or advancedwindowsusa.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Crews have just cleared this accident on the off-ramp from westbound SR 201 at 3200 West. We're back to a crash-free commute on all of your Valley freeways. Dracula returns, and yes, there are flying vampires. Live with the Ballet West Orchestra, October 20th through the 28th. Tickets at balletwest.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today with a high of 64. Sunny and warmer through the rest of the week. Right now, 62 degrees, partly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
As we often say, it's not about what was or what is, it's always about what's next. And sometimes we get so bogged down in either dissecting where we've been or being so hunkered down and trying to protect where we are that we often can no longer move towards what's next. And it's always about what's next. Someone who looks at the world as next is now is Jim Pethokoukis, who has an extraordinary book called The Conservative Futurist. And Jim, welcome to the show.
Boy, hey, thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it.
This is great, and I love your perspective on this, and just help our listeners kind of understand the baseline of the book in terms of how we've gone from looking at maybe this conservatism point of view to kind of being a hunkered down and not advancing point of view, which really isn't what America was about at the beginning, and it certainly shouldn't be now.
Yeah, sort of the conservative part of the conservative futurist vision is that I think, even though I think if you ask maybe the regular person what it means to be conservative, they would talk a lot about, just tradition, or maybe they talk about looking backwards. That's not how I look at it. I think sort of part of conservatism is wanting to both, preserve the best of our inheritance of the past, which I would think is, economic and political freedom, and sort of rooting my sort of vision of the future in those values while also embracing rapid technological progress and economic growth. Because my futurism isn't about creating a detailed plan for the future. It's about creating an environment of economic growth where people and companies have the tools to create the future they would want to live in.
Yeah, it is. It's all about creating that space to move it forward. I know one of those who is a big fan of your work and your book is our friend George Will, and he described your book really well in terms of this idea of looking out on the horizon that creates space for exactly what you just described. In fact, we had George Will on the program recently. We were talking about baseball, and conserving the game actually required them to change it radically with a pitch clock and a no-shift rule and a host of other things. And to me, it seems like that's where you're headed in terms of how do we create that space for that economics, for all of those things to actually take place and happen.
Yeah. We have to make sure. And, I come at it from a few different angles in the book, but it's certainly the case that we have to make sure that if you have a good idea in this country, that you can go out and you can try to implement that idea. And for a long time, there are lots of ideas that we've made it very difficult to implement. If you had a great idea and it involved cyberspace and the internet, you could do it. If it involved the real world, physical stuff, it became much harder. And right now, we're seeing a ton of very early innovation in areas we talk a lot about AI. Your listeners are probably sick of hearing about AI. But you know what? We have these really amazing new startups in areas like nuclear fusion, not fission, but nuclear fusion and deep geothermal. And we want to make sure that they're able to grow and expand their businesses. When in the past we've created, and the whole book isn't about regulation, but I think that's been part of the problem.
Yeah.
We've made it very difficult to build in the real world.
Yeah, that regulatory burden really has killed a lot of great innovation and plans. The government weighing in a lot of areas has also inhibited those upstart companies at the bottom that are trying to be scrappy and innovative, where the kind of the bigger organizations at the top can afford the lawyers and lobbyists to deal with the regulations, but that doesn't help us.
And we're seeing with AI right now. I mean, I said people are sick of hearing about it. We had this AI breakthrough. We got to enjoy what it might give us for about 15 minutes before the stories about taking all the jobs, killing us, and that we need to pause it, regulate it, nationalize it. We started hearing a lot more about that. So this isn't just about like nuclear energy back in the 70s. It's about new breakthroughs right now.
Yeah, and so important. One of the things that you have in your book that I love the framing is that, America used to be America's dream factory. But then as we got into the 20th century, caution, cynicism, regulation, all of those things caused us to kind of hunker down and not be able to lean into that rapid change. So give me an example of an area that we can lean into, or a place that would be a good starting point in terms of that kind of transformation.
Well, I think a really good example is, the conservatives who read the book will love the part about regulation. But, there's also a lot about like what government's not doing that it's probably the appropriate role for government to do. In the 60s we had space race and Project Apollo. We spent a ton of money in R&D, and then when we won the space race, we began over the years to just spend far less and less as a share of our economy on R&D. I would go back to like those 1960s levels, and after the space race we had Project Nothing. There wasn't a Project Apollo 2. We could have had a Project Nuclear Fusion. We could have had a Project Clean Energy. We didn't do it. In fact, we kept doing other things. You want to have an idea for a supersonic jet that can get from New York to L.A. in an hour? Nope, we banned that. You couldn't have that either. And only right now, for instance, that one area are we beginning to see the kind of innovation that we could have had 50 years ago. And that's across sectors. Think of every big breakthrough in the last few years, and there's been a lot. SpaceX. That's great. I'm glad finally, we can get stuff into orbit like 95% cheaper than we could before. It's opened up this whole possibility of an orbital economy. But you know what? We could have had those breakthroughs decades earlier, but we as a society, we chose not to. We chose to stop the nuclear age, the space age, among others.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. This is a great read. You're definitely going to want to check this one out. And I love the way you framed it, Jim, in terms of this is not a left-right issue. This is a forward future issue that we've all got to wrap our heads around. Government has a role to play. Business has a role to play. Society has a role to play. Just in our last minute, just give us a quick snapshot. What's one thing you wish we were talking about relating to the future that we're just kind of missing, or it's just kind of under the radar?
I would say that we are seeing enough sort of emerging technologies that if we do what we're supposed to on the research side, on the regulatory side, whether it's AI, biotechnology, that this economy could grow so much faster that the kinds of issues that we're worried about, with wage stagnation or the national debt, we really can't, I think, grow our way out of those problems. Hey, in the 1990s, we had an economic boom. We had a ton of inequality. People didn't care because everybody was doing better. I want a world we have an economy where everyone is doing better, far better than any of us are imagining right now.
I love that. Again, the book is called The Conservative Futurist. Jim Pethokoukis is an economic policy expert, senior fellow, and DeWitt Wallace Chair at the American Enterprise Institute. Jim, thanks for joining us today. This is a great read. This is great stuff. And this is an important conversation for all of us to really lean into. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Boy, thanks a lot for having me on.
All right, we'll go ahead and step aside for a quick break. When we come back, former Relief Society President Gene Bingham from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints joins us from Poland to discuss the importance of religious liberty and the role of faith in society. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And with that,
the office of Speaker of the House is hereby declared vacant.
The U.S. House removes its Speaker for the first time in history, and no amount of finger-pointing or blame can change it.
He did what speakers are supposed to do. He passed the bill.
This is a Republican civil war.
Getting 200 Republicans to trust you isn't enough to stay Speaker.
What happens in Congress next, and how do we fix a House that is broken? Listen each day this week to KSL News Radio.
Okay, tonight on NBC is so amazing, I'm setting my time machine to do not miss.
You don't have a time machine.
Then how do I know Quantum Leap is back with dramatic jumps through time and a huge twist, followed by nonstop action on the return of Magnum P.I.?
Because you're a super fan. You named your houseplant Higgins.
That ficus is my best friend.
Don't miss Magnum P.I. after Quantum Leap, premiering tonight on NBC.
I should go water Higgins.
Then stay tuned for KSL 5 News at 10. Are you ready for Spy School?
Okay, here we go. All right, let's do this.
Tonight at 10.
Oh, awesome.
KSL takes you along for the ride. Woo! Learn real-life survival tactics. And feel the adrenaline rush.
It's a wonderful way to make a living.
Utah's Spy School.
I can't do that. Yeah, trust me, you can do it.
Tonight on KSL 5 News at 10.
Hey guys, do you know what makes Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City different? You. Every Revive treatment and medication is personalized just for you. Revive has the experts that guys go to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their daily performance. Since 2011, they've helped thousands of local men suffering with the symptoms of low T and ED. Their goal is simple, to get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. Your best performance requires more than generic ED medications or a low-dose testosterone booster at a low-ball price like you find online. Revive medications are custom compounded, affordable, and guaranteed to resolve your issues. Stop dealing with the symptoms of low T or ED. Book your T-check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit us at ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
The country's largest used RV show is back and better than ever. Come find the biggest used RV selection in years, October 5th through the 7th at the Shops at Southtown. We're bringing in a massive range of used RVs from 6 locations in 3 states for this event. Shop used travel trailers, fifth wheels, motorhomes, toy haulers, and more all on site. Plus, find even more used models online at countriesrvshow.com. You'll find used RV pricing starting as low as $10,000. Along with a huge selection of used RVs, find new RVs straight from the factory already discounted for fall. Plus, all remaining 2023s are at fall show pricing. Strike the best RV deal of the season with no payments until 2024 on approved credit. Not to mention huge trade-in offers on your current RV. And check out our Hunter's Corner just in time to kick off your hunting season. We'll also have consignment RVs at private sale prices backed by dealer support. Don't miss your best chance to extend your fall camping season during the country's largest used RV show. 3 days only, October 5th through the 7th at the Shops at Southtown. Open daily at 10 a.m. with free admission. Sponsored by Bish's RV.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
KSL has your tickets for Taylor. We're filling a megaplex theater full of Swifties, and we want you there. Listen for the keyword weekdays at 8:45, 11:45, and 3:45. Then text it to 57500 for your chance to win. Want a reminder? Text the word Taylor to 57500 and we'll alert you when the contest is about to start. Details and more chances to win at KSLNewsRadio.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, there's a new organization working to restore the Great Salt Lake, calling itself Grow the Flow. Second, Intermountain Medical Center, making it easier for women to get mammograms, extending the hours of its clinics on Saturdays. And third, President Biden says he doesn't want to see any more spending agreements negotiated at the last possible moment. Right now, 62 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City, And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
We are pleased today to have joining us from Poland, Jean B. Bingham, who, of course, was the 17th General Relief Society president for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She also serves now on the board of the Sutherland Institute and is calling us from Poland because she and her husband are serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ in Brussels. And I'll still call you President Bingham, but we're so glad to have you on the show today. You had a great piece in Deseret.com that we wanted to get to today, this separation of church and state as a gift. Kind of give us the baseline for why you wrote that.
You know, as I thought about that, it's been a challenge over the years for a lot of people. But really, as we have looked at history, before we were America, many countries had a church that was supported by the state. And each citizen, whether they belonged to that church or not, was required to pay taxes. And that was something that our founding fathers thought was inappropriate. And each person should have the choice of what church they belong to, and it should not be mandated by the government. And in fact, if someone did not want to belong to any church at all, that would be a person's choice.
So important. And one of the things that I loved early on in your piece, you actually talked about the use of the term separation in and of itself. Explain that for us, because I think a lot of us have a conception of what that separation is or what it means, and you took it in a little deeper, I think, more nuanced measure.
When I think about separation, first of all, I think about being separated from loved ones, for instance. That can really feed anxiety, can give you some distress. On the other hand, if you're in a difficult situation, being separated from that provides relief. So really, in a religious sense as well, or in separation of church and state, you don't have to have a worry about anyone infringing on your rights, if you will put it that way. I think that the elements of religion and government are essential, of course, to a healthy democracy, but they don't need to be intertwined so that one excludes the other.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the way you framed it in terms of this kind of space between the separation, kind of this bumpy, turbulent space that where as they kind of bump up against each other. And we felt that a little bit in our country, especially over the last decade or so, in terms of what that separation really is or what that really means.
You know, it's true. We've had, as you said, a turbulent boundary layer between religion and state. And it's been one of those things we've had to learn over the years. And I think the closer we've come to agreeing on the meaning, we've had more harmony and more unity. The more we have allowed one another freedom of choice. I think one of the things that has been really interesting to me as I've been working here in Brussels is that we work a lot on enhancing freedom of religion or belief, that all people should have that opportunity. And when you allow one another that opportunity, there's less turbulence between groups.
I love that. And I think there's so many opportunities to get past that turbulence because in that turbulence, there's a lot of the misunderstandings and misconceptions that can even lead to prejudice and persecution. And I love this idea of being able to eliminate some of that and actually recognize what can be done. And it's one of the things that you did both as the 17th Relief Society General President for the Church of Jesus Christ. As you saw that around the world, give us kind of a sense of that in terms of why society, whether you are a religious person or not, benefits from that freedom of religion.
When we have freedom of religion or belief to choose what your belief is and to act on that, and you allow others that same privilege, there is much less jarring, there's much less warring between factions. You, in a sense, I guess, allow each other to live and let live. We wish we see more and more of that in the world, don't we? When I think about all the challenges in the world, the wars and that have caused so many heartaches and death, sometimes, and as we know in the history of the world, fairly often, the cause has been religion. And as we remove that discord, we can certainly get to a spot where we can work on the real problems. We can work on helping one another. We can help each other move forward. That can color your whole life when you feel disenfranchised, when you feel forced, when you feel that you have no other option in life. And as you said, many people can be persecuted for their beliefs. And that really creates a disconnect with other people in your community.
You know, during your time as the Relief Society General President, again, one of the largest and oldest women's organizations in the world, you saw the impact of that, and you actually mentioned this in your piece at Deseret.com, talking about the incalculable role that faith plays in women's lives. Describe that to us.
Visiting with women around the world, it was remarkable to see how women who were allowed to have their own opinions about religion, who could actually participate the way they chose, were really happier. As I did some studies, it was fascinating that places that allow women those choices to balance appropriately with church and state, they have more happiness in their lives. They are more successful mothers. They are more likely to report that their life has meaning and purpose, and they can bring those characteristics to where they live, to their communities, so that they continue to enhance the spirit of cooperation and kindness. It really does become a greater civic happiness for the community.
Yeah, I think it's so important that that comes into the public square. As you mentioned, those women report that, you know, more meaning, more purpose, more sense of well-being, personal happiness, and then that impact that just ripples through a neighborhood, through a community, and through society. It's such a major thing. You've also seen this both in your current role and also in your previous role in terms of international women and the impact that it can have. Give us a little sense of that.
You know, internationally, women who live in areas that support freedom of religion also have a higher health and happiness rating, not just in the United States, but they're also, which I thought was fascinating, they are greater contributors to the economy. So they are able to contribute more to the family, to the support, and there's actually less corruption in those areas. And when you think about where you want to live, we certainly would rather have a community where people are trusting and honest and kind to one another and help one another to grow and help one another's children. And that's a kind of situation you find for women when they live in areas that support freedom of religion and belief.
It's so amazing how interconnected all of that is, from the health outcomes to education, and then as you just mentioned, that upward mobility and opportunity. All of those seem to be interconnected to this ability to have a belief and to be able to share that belief or to bring that belief, their whole authentic self, into the public square.
And when you think about faith-based groups, how much work do they do? That's absolutely remarkable, because they have that choice to work together and they want unity for everyone. They tend to be the helpers when there is a significant challenge in the community, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's any kinds of things. Faith-based communities tend to look outward and want everyone to feel happy and included. And when they're allowed to participate in the public square, as you say, with their religious feelings, they can be much more effective in bringing that unity.
And then finally, just real quickly, you've also seen that you kind of inferred the humanitarian portion of all of this and the work that faith-based groups do with NGOs and others around the world. Just give us a sense of why that religious liberty, that separation of church and state, is such a gift when it comes to really providing relief, as you talked about, whether it's here in the United States or anywhere around the world.
Whenever people are working together in harmony, they're much more likely to be able to provide substantial benefits to society. For instance, there's so many groups that look out for others, orphans or widows or those who are disabled or those who are in need of education. Those kinds of needs are really best met in the community. And it's interesting how many times faith groups are the basis of that kind of help. And women tend to really keep those kinds of efforts going.
Such an important conversation. Jean B. Bingham, 17th Relief Society General President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She served from April of 2017 to August of 2022. She's now a board member at the Sutherland Institute, and currently she and her husband are serving as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ in Brussels, Belgium. And we appreciate you joining us from Poland tonight. We appreciate you staying up a little later and squeezing us into the schedule. We always appreciate your perspective and how you model what that separation of church and state is, how it is a gift, and how it can impact individuals all around the world. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Boyd.
Really important conversation there with Jean Bingham. And Really appreciated her staying up late Poland time to have a conversation with us here about what I think is an important part of the conversation. Being able to take your whole authentic self into the public square makes a difference in the public square. And places around the world that allow that, allow human flourishing to take place. And whether you're a person of faith or of no faith, there is an impact of faith in the world. Well, that wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We're going to step aside for some top-of-the-hour news, but don't go anywhere. We're going to go behind the scenes after the break with former Congressman Rob Bishop. Has a new book coming out, also has some extraordinary perspective into what did happen, why it happened, and what comes next as it relates to the House of Representatives. Stick around. More Inside Sources coming up on KSL News Radio.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City.
Listen at home on any smart speaker and in your car at 102.7 FM.
This is KSL News Radio,
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. There's a new study that was done with help from the University of Utah that shows genetic factors play a role in why some people attempt suicide. KSL News Radio's Alessandra Harris has details.
This study finds that all people have some biological risk for suicide. Certain genetic factors, such as if there is a history of suicide in a family, are good indicators that members of that family have a higher biological risk. While no single gene causes suicide, the study finds that people with higher biological risk can have increased chances of suicide when combined with other behavioral, genetic, or environmental conditions.
Scientists say this heightened understanding of biological causes will help with suicide prevention in the future. Sandy police say they've recovered $40,000 in stolen construction materials. Officials say they were stolen from a job site in Sandy, and officers found them at a home less than 2 hours after they were reported stolen. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. More than 75,000 healthcare workers employed by Kaiser Permanente walked off the job as part of a 3-day strike. Their union says it's about pay and unfair labor practices, the largest healthcare workers strike in U.S. history. Respiratory therapist David Boston, who's been a loyal Kaiser employee for 25 years, says he wishes he could just get back to work.
Everything's going up except our pay.
And again, that strike intended to last 3 days. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average is up now substantially, 126 points on the day. The NASDAQ is up 176 points. And our KSL weather getting sunny, and it'll stay that way. That's next. KSL News on 202.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like, you know what you should do and what's the best thing for you, but you just can't do it. BetterHelp can help you figure out what's holding you back. BetterHelp is entirely online therapy that offers video, phone, or even live chat online therapy sessions. BetterHelp is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can also switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. BetterHelp Therapy empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's helpful in learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp online therapy a try. Start working for yourself instead of against yourself. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/Salt Lake. That's BetterHelp.com/Salt Lake.
Derek Overstreet, founder of the New Millennium Group. We're a financial planning firm. Listen, we're fiduciaries. We have advisors standing by right now to take your call. That's 888-999-6370, 888-999-6370. The reason you're going to want to call is we're going to help you retire 3 to 5 years before you thought possible. Now, imagine how that would be if you could actually retire 3 to 5 years sooner than your plan was. The way we do this is by putting together a step-by-step plan, taking into consideration any rental properties that you have, any pension income that you have, your Social Security. Listen, we put that all together for you in writing. It will allow us to build your income based on inflation. You know, inflation has been rapidly rising. You and I both need a plan that whatever we start out our income at, in 5 or 10 years, we're going to need 40% more income. So if you're one of those people listening and you'd like a plan in writing, give us a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370, or go to utahsfinancialplanner.com.
The Salt Lake Chamber is Utah's voice for business. Okay, that sounds great, but what does it really mean? Well, as Utah's largest and longest-standing business association, they support and champion community prosperity throughout the state. And if you're in business, well, that's a very good thing for you. Be sure to listen to the Chamber's Speaking on Business, weekdays at 7:20, 11:55, and 5:20 p.m. on KSL News Radio.
Les Olson IT is now a Ricoh Graphic Arts and Production Systems dealer. Ricoh chose Les Olson because of our reputation for superior service and national recognition. Les Olson IT chose Ricoh Graphics because they're the best value compared to other commercial-grade printers. Ricoh excels in high volume, high speed, high resolution, and offers an exciting fifth color. Learn more at lesolson.com.
Les Olson IT.
Traffic and weather together are brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Looks like we have a little bit of trouble in traffic northbound I-15 in Murray. It's after the south interchange as you're approaching 5300 South. I'm seeing a couple of vehicles pull out of traffic over to the right shoulder. Not sure if it's a crash or if there are any other issues, but it's definitely bogged down as you go from 7200 up to 5300 South. How do you know if you're getting the best deal on employee benefits? Well, you don't, unless you get free quotes from every insurance company every year. Visit shopmyplan.com to get free quotes. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today with a high around 64, then sunny and warmer through the rest of the week. Right now, partly cloudy and 61 degrees. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, we want to get beyond the headlines and behind the scenes a little bit to find out a little more about what happened yesterday as the drama unfolded on the floor of the House of Representatives. But more than just the drama, the personality clashes, the posturing, the rage, and all of that, we want to get to the reason. Was it just policy? Was it just personality? Were there some processes at stake that maybe got sideways and maybe some principles that a few people chose to ignore? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we get beyond the headlines today, we're going to turn to someone who knows his way around behind the scenes, but who also understands that if you start with bad procedure, you always get bad results. You can never get to good policy. Someone that I always look to in our nation's capital as someone who understood how to do it and how to do it right. And that's former Utah Representative Rob Bishop. And he joins us on the line. Rob, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's good always good to talk to you, Boyd.
So let's start with how you saw that unfold yesterday. What were some of the things, again, beyond kind of the obvious headlines there, that you were saying or looking at as that all played out yesterday?
Well, obviously, this was an issue more of personality than policy. Because if you take what Gates was talking about, what most of the conference was talking about, what McCarthy was talking about, as far as policy issues, they're basically saying the same thing. It was a personality clash that was going in there and a procedural clash. I've always said that a lot of the procedures we do in Congress are poor. And back in 2010, I was on a transition committee, a transition team that came up with new laws and new regulations and new rules. I was amazed how many options there are and how convoluted they have become over the course of years. And most people in Congress don't really understand this. When you talk procedure, a lot of people's eyes just glaze over. But if you have good procedures, you will have better results. And part of the problem of Congress is they simply have some very lousy procedures.
Yeah, and unless you have people who are willing to do the hard work and heavy lifting of the procedural work and understanding the procedures, then all you get is the theatrics and the politics, because that's the only thing they know how to do.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who, even though they claim to be very conservative and support the Constitution, when it comes to understanding principles like federalism or how to do a budget without having 12 separate appropriations items, they still don't get it. They don't quite understand it. There are some things that could be changed that would actually help Congress significantly.
Yeah, I know you've got a new book coming out next week titled The Things I Learned in Congress They Never Taught in School. Give us a little bit of that backstory and what you got into there.
Well, like when I went back to Congress, I taught high school for almost 30 years. And I had taught like AP government classes. I read all the textbooks. I subscribed to Roll Call and The Hill and other magazines back there. I had guest speakers. And when I went back to Congress, I realized the stuff I had been teaching was really pretty naive. That what I read in the textbooks is not necessarily what actually happens on the floor of the House or behind the scenes in the House. So I started making notes of stories I wish I had had when I was teaching, and I basically compiled it into a book that talks about not only the structure of government and the philosophy behind it, but how Congress is organized, how it operates, and how it could be done better, with some practical examples of what we actually went through and how difficult it was to get there. And so it started as almost like a diary, and it has evolved into what I think is a book that really talks about what Congress should have been and what it still could be.
Yeah, and let's get into some of that, what it could and should be, because I think one of the unique things that you had both as a member of Congress and now I think in this book is that ability to look at it historically first and then look at how do we actually apply that in the world today. And I want to get into this idea of federalism. We talk a lot about federalism on this show, that it could be a path on a lot of things. Give us from your perspective some areas where even just that simple federalism approach could change some of the drama and dynamics that we see currently in Congress.
Well, and one of the things I did as part of the Republican Study Committee, they asked me to form a task force on the 10th Amendment. So our goal was to illustrate bills that were being introduced that would strengthen the 10th Amendment and strengthen the ability of states to function effectively to provide a balance to the national government. And one of my goals was to go down on the floor and plead the 10th when somebody introduced pieces of legislation that I thought expanded it. What I found out that was even good conservatives who would say, I support the 10th Amendment, I support the right of states to have equal opportunity, so they are a counterbalance to the national government. If they saw an opportunity to actually come up with a program that either had their name on it or expanded the power of the national government, they would throw their ideas about federalism under the bus. For example, we had one really good conservative who wanted to add physical education as a mandate under No Child Left Behind. Now, first of all, there's no problem in my mind with having physical education. It's good. It's good to get kids out and moving. They actually brought Richard Simmons back to lobby us. Fortunately, he was wearing a suit all the time. He was back there. But there's nothing wrong with that approach. What was wrong was saying Congress is the one that should be mandating this. That's a responsibility of definitely a school board. And if you can't get teacher buy-in, you're not going to have a good program anyway. Congress is not a school board. But this was an example of nice conservatives who believe in federalism, but once they saw the opportunity of actually forcing something they wanted to have done, they moved right into it. Those are the kinds of things that should never take place.
Yeah, and so much of the focus of late, of course, has been on debt ceiling, the national debt, of course, $33 trillion plus, the shutdown, showdown, and the fake fights that go along with that, 11th hour bills nobody reads. You were one when you were in Congress. You were quick to say that often it was, the House would get things done and then they would send it across to sit on either the majority leader's desk to die. And it didn't matter if it was a Democrat or a Republican. It was still the place where good legislation went to die.
More and more that has been the case, and there are some procedures of the Senate that are a problem with that. Look, one of the things that was also helpful for me is I had the experience of being in the legislature in Utah. And I don't want to sound too pro-Utah, but Utah gets it right. In Utah, there are two appropriations bills. You have one for education, which since there's a separate funding source, that makes sense, and one for everything else. So in Utah, when you deal with the appropriations bill, you see everything, and you can make balances and adjustments. In Washington, there are 12 appropriations bills that go through. So if, for example, you're dealing with the military appropriations and you think there should be less and maybe more on parks, you can't move that across because parks is on a separate appropriations bill. And one of the problems in Washington, which caused this slowdown that led almost to a shutdown, is that you hadn't had the ability of passing 12 separate views, and you have no ability of trying to coordinate those 12 different types. Even the staff doesn't really understand because they dig down in their narrow areas and can't give a broad overview of what we need as far as an overall budget or an overall appropriations. Not having 12 appropriations would be the first thing you should procedurally do to give logic to it. Another thing Utah has is an end date. There is no end date so which you can backplan. When I was Speaker of the House in Utah, we decided there were going to be 6 major issues. We decided when we wanted to do them. I basically had a syllabus for the House in Utah. So that on this date, we would make that decision. They don't do that in Washington, which is why Washington always punts down the issues to next year or down the road because no one knows what the end date actually is. Even the calendar isn't an end date. The first term I served in Congress, I went back there, and for the month of January, we were dealing with issues that the prior Congress, before I had been elected, had failed to do. So even the calendar doesn't give you a good end date. Congress needs to establish a firm end date so they can back plan to decide when decisions have to be made.
Yeah, great stuff as always. New book coming out next week, The Things I Learned in Congress They Never Taught in School, former Representative Rob Bishop. You can pre-order that now at robbishopincongress.com. You can even throw in my name in there and get a little discount and get that. It will be a great read because it will be full of insight and specifics in terms of what we do, how we move it forward. And in all sincerity, if I could nominate one person to go back and be the Speaker of the House, it actually would be Rob Bishop. And he also gives the best Capitol tour on the planet, bar none. Rob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for that compliment. It's kind. Actually, you don't have to be a member of the House to be Speaker, so it's still feasible.
That's all right. I'm gonna mail that in right now.
Good news.
All right.
Thank you, Boyd.
Hey, thanks, Rob. That's former Representative Rob Bishop. And actually, Rob Bishop would be a fantastic Speaker of the House and because he knows the process. He's paid the price to understand the process and the procedure. And if you start with good procedure, you're much more likely to get to good results. So great perspective there from Rob Bishop and so many things that we can check out and learn from all the things he learned while he was in Congress.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Do you need tickets for Taylor?
Yes, please.
It's hard to find good ones to the Eras concert movie.
Tell me about it.
So let KSL do this for your kids. Or maybe it's for you. We're giving away a pair of tickets to a private KSL screening of the Eras movie. Just listen each day at 8:45, 11:45, and 3:45 for your chance to win. 3 chances to win every weekday. 8:45, 11:45, and 3:45 for the next 2 weeks on KSL News Radio.
Are you ready to go for the gold? This is your moment. All you have to do, real simple, open a checking account at Hercules Credit Union, qualify for their gold tier checking status within the first 90 days, and Hercules will deposit $200 into your account. That's a great thing. Simply open an account, qualify for gold status, and $200 extra is going into your account. Plus, you get all the extraordinary benefits of being a gold tier checking member. You'll get identity theft protection, travel benefits, health and wellness savings, family benefits, Ticket Express, and a host of other things that will help you on your financial future. It's a great way to go. Hercules has been doing this since 1946. They are all about growing stronger together. Best of financial services anywhere. Check them out at their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, or Salt Lake City. Or as always, with our friends at Hercules Credit Union, you can find them online at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
It's easy to think all money managers are pretty much the same. But at Fisher Investments, we're clearly different.
Different? How? You sell high commission investment products, right?
No. Fisher Investments doesn't sell any commission-based investment products.
Well, you must earn commissions on trades.
Nope, never at Fisher. We're a fiduciary, obligated to act in our client's best interest. It's the highest standard of care for a financial advisor.
How do you know what's in their best interest?
We get to know our clients and then tailor a portfolio based on their goals and needs.
But you probably sneak in some hidden and layered fees.
No, we have one transparent management fee, structured so we do better when our clients do better.
Wow, you really do look out for your clients.
That's because our top priority is helping them achieve a comfortable retirement. It might be why most of our clients come from other money managers. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you switch to us. Fisher Investments. Clearly different money management.
Investments and securities involve the risk of loss.
This is the lunch rush at your local deli. Orders are flying in. Online, on the phone, and in person.
Order for Nick.
So is it possible that fast internet could help your business outrun the rush? It is with Comcast Business. Up-leveling your speed with gig speed Wi-Fi, powering all your devices, and fast downloads and uploads, powered by the next generation 10G network. With Comcast Business, next level speed isn't just possible, it's happening. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Get started with fast speeds and advanced security for $59.99 a month for 12 months with a 2-year agreement. Plus, ask how to get an $800 prepaid card with a qualifying internet bundle. Call or go online to learn more. Ends 11/12/2023. Restrictions apply. Requires paperless billing and automatic payments. New 50 megabits per second internet and Security Edge customers only. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. After 12 months, regular rates apply. Gig Wi-Fi requires gig internet and compatible router.
Hi, this is Clark Ivory with Ivory Homes. 2023 is turning out to be a great year for Ivory home buyers. Let me tell you why. The number of existing homes for sale is way down, so with fewer used homes to choose from, new home sales have soared. At Ivory Homes, we are creating all kinds of possibilities for you. A great selection of new homes ready for move-in, and fixed interest rates as low as 5.875%, saving you hundreds on your monthly payment. Check out Ivory Homes today.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomis. First, a new study shows there are genetic factors related to the risk of suicide. Second, didn't take long for Sandy police to recover $40,000 worth of building materials that were found less than 2 hours after they were stolen. Third, workers at one of the nation's largest healthcare systems are on strike on the West Coast. Right now, 61 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Members of the Senate have reintroduced legislation aimed at reducing government regulation deemed unnecessary. The bill is called the Unnecessary Agency Regulations Reduction Act. There's always got to be a good name for that. So we want to take a look at what specifically this bill would accomplish, what would it do, and how are those unnecessary government regulations slowing down progress in the country? Really thrilled to have joining us on the program today Nan Swift, resident fellow for the governance program at the R Street Institute. Nan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So give us some perspective. We know that Senator Rick Scott was leading this initiative to reintroduce the Unnecessary Agency Regulations Reduction Act, which is a mouthful. But give us some perspective on that.
Well, actually, this is building on something that the senator did in Florida when he was governor. And there it ended up getting rid of about 5,000 unnecessary regulations, which, A, tells you how many there are to start with, but B, also shows you one of the ways that Florida has become an economic powerhouse over the last few years. It really helped make things more efficient and lets innovation thrive.
Yeah, so let's look at how that process works. We know in Washington, when I was there, we actually had a display of all of the, then it was 75,000 plus pages. I can't imagine what it is now, of all the different regulations that come out of the agencies as opposed to what is passed by Congress. That's always a stark and stunning thing to look at. But walk us through in terms of how this bill would work to both reduce on the front end and then actually effectively dispose some of those that are no longer relevant.
Well, what this would do is it would ask the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs to start compiling an agency by agency list of regulations that are duplicative, that are extremely burdensome, or ones that are simply dated. This is based on some of the great work that the Comptroller General has done at the Government Accountability Office, where every year they put out a whole list of programs that are duplicative, things where there's fragmentation across different agencies. And then once Congress has this list, the bill also has a fast track feature to make sure that this can get to the floor very quickly after some input from committees, but it means that there's no stalling, which is a major problem with really any good idea in Congress these days.
And so often it seems to me that you have, one of those regulations that maybe it's okay for the big businesses. They can handle it because they have an army of lawyers and lobbyists and compliance officers. But it often really hurts those at the bottom end, those innovators, those startup companies where all the innovation takes place just can't compete and do that. And so as you look at that, what are some areas where you could see this saying, hey, this is no longer needed? Maybe we needed this at the start of this industry, but that's clearly no longer needed. How do we get through that process? And I do love the fast track component so that no one is using the lawyers and lobbyists to just slow walk it while they still have the advantage.
Right. Well, especially for big businesses, it does really put the thumb on the scale in their favor. It works well for them when they can, as you say, absorb these extra regulations, absorb the extra costs. Actually, some of the things that I'd like to see are ones that are rules that are currently being used as protectionist measures. Like, I'm sure you heard about the famous catfish rule a couple years ago. That was a favorite of Senator McCain's before he passed, wherein the USDA said, you know what, we would like to start inspecting the catfish that's here for consumption, when that's something that the FDA already does, and any seafood wholesaler, any seafood importer in the country already has FDA staff on site checking out all the food, but now they have to add additional staff just for catfish, because that way U.S. catfish producers could make it more expensive to import catfish, which, I mean, this is a small one. I don't know how many people are eating catfish on a daily basis, but it's a significant cost. And it matters. This, and also taxpayers pay for now an extra Office of Inspection. It's a couple $1 million a year. But these things add up. And it's also just the idea. And when you let these things go, when you're like, oh, that's a little regulation, more slips under the wire.
Yeah, no question about that. And it is often those duplicative, outdated, burdensome regulations that everybody can kind of shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, it's $1 million here, it's $1 million there. But it does add up. And sadly, it drives a lot of that competitive nature out of the business.
One ridiculous one that we only got rid of like 2 weeks ago is this tea taster board. I don't know if you saw the headlines about it, but for like 100 years, starting in the late 1800s, we had a federal board of tea experts, federal tea tasters, This was finally repealed in 1996, and also it was the only imported food item that was treated this way. But it wasn't until 2 weeks ago that we finally got it off the books. So that was a decades-long process, even after that board was repealed.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. There's so many things to dive into. We're going to keep tapping into you, Nan, as we watch this roll forward, and hopefully this gets done, and we can actually get to removing some of those things rather than just continuing to add more and more. Nan Swift's a resident fellow for the governance program at the R Street Institute. Nan, thanks so much for weighing in today.
Thanks for having me.
There's so many important things in there in this bill that I think are just critical because, again, we have just not just pages, we have tens of thousands of pages. Like they stack to the ceiling number of pages of different regulations, many of which have just been on the books forever, some that are duplicative of other things that are going on, some that are just so outdated, like I really don't think we needed tea tasters here in the country. And yet we've done that. Even though we ended it, wanted to end it back in 96, it took all the way to 2023 for it to actually get off the books. And part of that is lawyers and lobbyists that kind of slow walk things that give advantages to bigger businesses. It's not good for the economy. It's not good for innovation. It's not good for consumers. Government has a role to play, to be sure. But we have so many things that are so duplicative, so burdensome, so outdated, and just laughable, as we just heard about catfish and tea, that we have to get past those. This is a good bill. I hope this gets through because it would begin to change the dynamics in our nation's capital. We'll go ahead and step aside for some bottom of the hour news. Stick around. Megan McArdle is going to join us from the Washington Post coming up next. You don't want to miss it.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomis. KSL's top local story this hour, 15% of Qualtrics employees are losing their jobs today, but it's not clear how many people that will impact here in Utah. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobe reports.
The company says they are cutting 780 jobs, impacting people in all their offices. This comes after the company was recently acquired by a Silicon Valley tech investment firm for $12.5 billion. Qualtrics CEO Zig Serafin says the decision to reduce staff was painful, but also necessary.
The CEO also says Qualtrics plans on shuffling hundreds of other positions. A man who shot at a West Valley police officer will be going to prison. Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill says Angel Bernardino was stopped in April on suspicion of DUI, fired at the officer after crashing his vehicle. The officer wasn't hit, but she returned fire and Bernardino was wounded. Bernardino pleaded guilty to assault on a peace officer and possession of a firearm by a restricted person. He was sentenced to 2 to 30 years in prison. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The race to succeed Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House is shaping up. ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy has more.
There are 2 declared candidates thus far. One is Ohio's Jim Jordan. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee was founding chair of the House Freedom Caucus. He's a fierce defender of former President Trump and a lead proponent of the impeachment inquiry into President Biden. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who has long served in top leadership posts, has also announced a run for the gavel. Scalise is currently battling blood cancer.
ABC's Stephen Portnoy. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading today up 127 points, and the NASDAQ up 176 points today. The S&P 500 was up 34 points. We'll be looking at sunshine over the next several days. KSL weather's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
You know, I like to talk about results. And when it comes to results on your journey to better health and wellness, there are no results that are better than having lost the weight and sustained it. Anybody can do it for a day or a week. You can do a fad diet, and it might give you a little bump or a little boost, but it's not sustainable. To me, it's sustainable results. That's what I've done with SOTA Weight Loss. It's SOTA, stands for state-of-the-art weight loss, because it is state-of-the-art. I dropped 37 pounds in 90 days. I'm almost 2 years in. and I'm right in the sweet spot and continuing to feel great. And it's all because it's a system. It's science. There's structure. You have your own coach and nutritionist to help you along the way. You break all of those bad habits of emotional eating. You understand what your body needs for fuel and energy. And it's a simple process, and the results don't lie. No one ever asks me, does it work? Because the results are right there. They can do the same for you. Check it out at sotaweightloss.com. It's SOTA weightloss.com.
Do you have chirping smoke detectors? What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and if you've ever experienced chirping smoke detectors, you already know how annoying it can be. A great first step to try and stop the chirping is to change the batteries. If the chirping continues, it's possible that your smoke detector has gone bad. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't even realize that manufacturers recommend replacing the smoke detector altogether after 10 years. If you remove the smoke detector from the wall, on the back you should find a date of when it was made. Do a little math and you'll know how old it is. Now, Any Hour Services knows being a homeowner means you've got a list a mile long of things to do around the house, and check my electrical system probably isn't one of them. That's why we've put together this radio special for any homeowners listening. One of our licensed electricians will perform a comprehensive inspection of your electrical system that includes testing those smoke detectors and give you a full written report for only $29. But you have to mention this ad when you call. Call Any Hour Services to schedule at 801-443-7300. 801-443-7300. Any Hour Services.
Advanced Window Products. Affordable windows from their factory to your front door in 8 weeks. Guaranteed. 801-850-9100 or advancedwindowsusa.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Trouble for Davis County drivers. An accident on southbound I-15 near 4th North in the Bountiful area has now been moved out of the lanes of travel and over to the right shoulder, but it still caused big backups into Centerville. If you're in the area, you will see, and coming off that on-ramp to join southbound I-15, you will need to get over to the left to get around it while crews remain on the scene. Your one-tank trip starts in Cedar City, Parowan, and Bryan Head. Scenic byways, fabulous fall colors, live theater, mountain biking, chairlift rides, ATVing, vibrant art, food, and downtown. Visit cedarcity.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today with a high of 64. Sunny and warmer through the rest of the week. Right now, mostly cloudy, 63 degrees. I'm Dan Bomis, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
When the Affordable Care Act passed in 2010, part of the goal of that legislation was to increase savings and reduce costs in your healthcare system. So, more than a decade since it passed, let's get to the results. How effective has it been in actually meeting the stated goals of the program? And this is one of those things we often miss in our politics, because it's not governance, it's politics, is we don't go back and measure and check and say, did it work? Did it not work? What should we tweak? How should we do it better? Well, someone who's always thinking about it at a deeper level helps us get to the right questions, because if you don't start with the right question, you never get to the right answer. And we're really pleased to have joining us once again on the program one of our favorite thinkers and writers, Megan McArdle, Washington Post columnist. Megan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You had a great piece on Obamacare, and give us the lowdown. What is the baseline? After over a decade, what have the results been, good, bad, and indifferent?
Look, I think there's been a lot of results, and, you know, some of the things that they wanted to do, they have achieved somewhat. We covered more people. The uninsured rate has fallen significantly. In other ways, it's been much less than people expected. I think we all remember the idea that we would bend the cost curve and that families would save a lot of money on their insurance premiums. We have not seen that. We've also, there were a lot of claims that were made about extending life expectancies, better infant mortality rates. You know, you heard over and over these comparisons to Europe. European infant mortality and lifespan rates, and you know they are higher often in many countries than ours are. Their infant mortality is lower. They live longer lives, and the kind of implication was, well, Obamacare is going to fix that. Instead, in fact, U.S. mortality rates have gotten worse since Obamacare passed. I'm not saying that those two things are causal. There's a lot going on there with obesity and drug addiction, but it has not had that intended result. And I think one of the areas that's been a big disappointment has been cost control, where we just have not seen the kind of major changes in healthcare delivery systems or in the price of healthcare that we were expecting.
Yeah, dig into that a little bit for us in terms that we always look for that pot of gold, that big pot of money that's going to change the game for everything. I know the unicorns bring it in. It's kind of the siren song, I think, in Congress. It always appears that way. But give us the actual dollars and cents. Where are we seeing it, and what are we actually seeing?
So the idea was that, one thing I actually should start by saying is actually healthcare costs have fallen. Or healthcare cost growth has fallen. Healthcare costs have not, but the rate of growth has slowed. And that's actually really important. We are not a country that has an excess cost growth problem in healthcare. We're a country that used to in the 80s and 90s. The thing is, that's not really about Obamacare. The decline starts around 2006, and while there are a lot of arguments about why that might be the case, the real answer is no one really knows why the rate of cost growth started to flatten out in that period. Obamacare was supposed to hasten that, and of course the high cost of insurance for families, still an enormous issue. It was supposed to bend the cost curve. It was supposed to save $2,500 per family. It's not really what we've seen. And so the reason is that a lot of the reforms that were expected to produce those cost savings and were part of the claim that it would reduce the deficit just never materialized for one reason or another. So one example, there was a board that was called IPAB, an acronym, that was going to evaluate treatments for cost effectiveness. And if costs grew too fast, they would recommend cuts based on those evaluations. Well, that board just died. No one wanted to staff it, and it just eventually went away. Another big reform was the Cadillac tax. That was going to be a tax on extremely expensive insurance plans. And what that was supposed to discourage employers from doing was offering these gold-plated benefits that because you don't pay taxes on your health insurance benefits, people were using to kind of boost compensation packages with a tax subsidy. That got basically killed because it was really unpopular. People who have those plans, including a lot of powerful unions and government employees, were very unhappy about that tax, and so that went away. And then there were the delivery side reforms. So, for example, accountable care organizations. These were going to be payment models that started in Medicare, where we were going to pay the holy grail of healthcare. We're going to pay for quality, not treatment. We're not going to just pay people to do stuff. We're going to pay them to produce healthy patients. Well, it turns out that these may have saved a little bit of money for the government, but not very much. And an agency that was set up to pilot these kinds of models, among other pilot programs they were going to do, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, that was supposed to save $2.7 billion over 10 years. Instead, it cost about twice that. And it just turned out to be a lot harder than we thought to make sustainable cuts in healthcare spending in ways that didn't make care worse.
So fascinating. As you look at that and dig into that just a little bit deeper, one of the things you pointed out in your piece was that it really does demonstrate how hard it is to change the big Titanic system and turn that boat around is no easy thing. You also talked about the fact that sometimes we try to do one thing, but the results end up being worse. You talked about hospitals and readmissions and emergency room visits and all of that was supposed to be a good cost saving, but then suddenly the incentives were all backwards, and so you end up with a worse result.
Yes, exactly. Now, with what we saw, for example, I think almost anyone who is old enough to remember Obamacare debates, which sadly I'm getting a little old.
Join the club.
Not as many people as it used to be. But we'll remember that one of the big things people always talked about, we're going to do preventative care and we're going to save all this money. People aren't going to be getting these expensive emergency room visits. They'll go see their primary care physician. Well, it turned out when you gave people Medicaid, which is how most of the coverage expansion actually ended up happening through Obamacare, it turned out they went to the emergency room more. not less, because they were now not worried about the bill. Now, that's not to say this is all bad. If they needed to go to the doctor, it's good that they got to go, but it didn't save money. The worst thing is that some of these reforms may actually have hurt patients. And the one that is the most worrisome, something called the hospital readmission program. Now, Obamacare's architects noticed that a lot of patients would go into the hospital, they would leave, and then they would go back. And these patients were costing a fortune because, these hospitalizations tend to be very expensive and complicated. This is in Medicare, so it's older patients. And so they basically penalized hospitals that were discharging patients who then needed to go back. They wanted to make sure that problem got taken care of the first time. Well, it turned out that if you penalize people for readmitting patients, they don't readmit patients. And they didn't, instead of fixing the problem, yes. And so instead of just making it so those people wouldn't have to come back, and I think anyone who's cared for an elderly patient knows that's harder than it sounds. If you have an elderly parent, sometimes you think everything's fine, and then everything suddenly is very much not fine.
Yeah.
That they would put the patients on observation status, they would send them home from the emergency room, and it may have killed thousands of patients. And so that's the kind of thing it turns out that, if it were easy, we'd already have done it a long time ago. Yeah, it's actually really hard to find those savings that don't hurt patients, don't affect quality of care, and don't make a lot of voters mad. Because, for example, we could save a bunch of money if we just cut doctor salaries in half.
Right.
But the doctors would be very upset about that, and they are a powerful political constituency.
No question about that. And I was going to end with that because I love that part of your piece, because the other thing, in addition to the unicorns bringing in the pot of gold, the other unicorn is all we have to do is, we just need to be like the UK or Sweden or the Netherlands. And that usually starts with doctors and nurses taking a 50% pay cut. And that just doesn't seem to be in the realm of even the fantasy land of having the unicorns bring it in.
Yeah, one of the things that I think people don't think about is that the erosion of manufacturing jobs, the shift towards the service economy. What used to be the really high-paying, great middle-class jobs were manufacturing jobs at some place like a Ford or a GM plant. Well, increasingly, what are the good jobs for people in those communities? It's, I got a job at the hospital. And those jobs, they pay well, they're steady, they're reliable, you're never out of work if you have one of these degrees. And to cut the salaries of those jobs, or even to use fewer of those people, that's actually a big political fight. You're taking away someone's paycheck, and not just their paycheck, but the life that they built, that they planned on, that they expected when they went and got that degree and put in those hours and cared for patients. And that is not an easy thing to do at all.
Fascinating stuff. And this is an important part of the conversation, as I said, as we began this, that we never really come back to. It's the results, measuring the results, what went right, what went wrong, what could have been done better. And I think there is a mixed bag when it comes to Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. But the problem is we've got to actually have the conversation. Congress has to deal with, okay, now what? And then have the political courage to do the what's next. Megan McArdle, Washington Post columnist, one of our favorite thinkers and writers. And Megan, as always, we appreciate you carving time out for us and helping us get to the real issues and all the stuff underneath the headlines. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, and that's Megan McArdle from the Washington Post, and it's a great piece. You should go check it out at the Washington Post. She really goes through that, and again, whether you were all in favor of the Affordable Care Act or you were all against it, that's not the issue. The issue is it's the law of the land, and so now let's evaluate and assess the law of the land. What is working? What is not working? What are the results? What can be tweaked? What can be changed? Are we really moving the needle when it comes to making healthcare more affordable? Are we really helping those that we're trying to help, or are we making it harder and making it worse? Those are not political questions. Those are governing questions. And if that sounds like a theme today, it's a theme today, because we are getting so lost in the politics that we have forgotten what it means to measure governance. And that is actually the job. We'll step aside for one last break. We'll come back with some final thoughts here on Inside Sources on KSL News Radio. Stick around.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing? Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit. And make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Okay, tonight on NBC is so amazing, I'm setting my time machine to do not miss.
You don't have a time machine.
Then how do I know Quantum Leap is back with dramatic jumps through time and a huge twist, followed by nonstop action on the return of Magnum P.I.?
Because you're a super fan. You named your houseplant Higgins.
That ficus is my best friend.
Don't miss Magnum P.I. after Quantum Leap, premiering tonight on NBC.
I should go water Higgins.
Then stay tuned for KSL 5 News at 10. Are you ready for Spy School?
Okay, here we go. All right, let's do this.
Tonight at 10.
Oh, awesome.
KSL takes you along for the ride. Woo! Learn real-life survival tactics. And feel the adrenaline rush.
It's a wonderful way to make a living.
Utah's Spy School.
I can't do that. Yeah, you trust me. You can do it.
Tonight on KSL 5 News at 10.
What's holding you back from learning the language you've always wanted to know?
Too hard.
Takes too long.
Not with Babbel. Babbel's lessons take just 15 minutes a day.
15 minutes isn't long.
Nope. And they're fun. So you don't realize you're learning a language, but you are. In 3 weeks, you're able to start having conversations. And Babbel's lessons are built around real life.
And with Babbel, it isn't hard.
It's perfect.
Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com. That's BABBEL.com.
Attention smart homeowners. You don't have to fall for flashy promises and companies that don't even prove their work. At Your Service Pros uses third-party verification software called MeasureQuick to ensure your new HVAC system is installed correctly. This ultimate game changer in the HVAC industry lets you, the homeowner, have proof of how your system was installed. At Your Service Pros utilizes our Bluetooth tools to upload all of your system's information into MeasureQuick. We rely on data-driven insights to properly commission, optimize, and fine-tune your HVAC system for peak performance, improving your family's comfort, lowering your utility bills, and extending the life of your HVAC system. With rebates and tax credits available totaling more than $7,500 on a dual fuel heating and cooling system, it is now more important than ever that your HVAC system be installed correctly. So call us today at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO. Have the peace of mind of saving up to 50% on your new system and knowing it's installed correctly by calling 801-YOUR-PRO.
Held over due to popular demand. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to save 40 to 80% on a hot tub and swim spa. This weekend only, Friday through Sunday, Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Be advised, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to save 40 to 80% on a hot tub and swim spa. This weekend only, Friday through Sunday, Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. 18-month interest-free financing. Our factories have demanded we sell 1,000 hot tubs and swim spas this weekend. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Huge factory incentives, factory rebates, this weekend only. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. We can remove your old hot tub. Free delivery of your new hot tub. Hot tub starting at $2,999. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Free delivery of your new hot tub. Just relax and enjoy. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Friday, noon to 8 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Free admission, free parking, free delivery. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Call 888-SPA-SALE or visit HotTubAndSwimSpaSale.com.
Hey guys, do you know what makes Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City different? You. Every Revive treatment and medication is personalized just for you. Revive has the experts that guys go to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their daily performance. Since 2011, they've helped thousands of local men suffering with the symptoms of low T and ED. Their goal is simple, to get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. Your best performance requires more than generic ED medications or a low-dose testosterone booster at a low-ball price like you find online. Revive medications are custom compounded, affordable, and guaranteed to resolve your issues. Stop dealing with the symptoms of low T or ED. Book your T-check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit us at revivemenshealth.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the CEO of Qualtrics says job cuts at his company are painful but also necessary. Second, a man who shot at a West Valley police officer during a traffic stop will be going to prison. And third, two high-profile Republicans are already in the race for Speaker of the House after Kevin McCarthy was voted out yesterday. Right now, mostly cloudy, 63 degrees in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson, and as we round out the program today, of course, there's a lot of the fallout as the dust begins to settle just a little bit on the drama that took place yesterday in the House of Representatives with the removal of Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And a lot of that's been broken down, and there's a lot of politics to it all. And as we talked about yesterday and throughout the program today, this was not good governing by either side. There's a lot of horrific politics. And sadly, we've allowed the politics to drive good governance out of our institutions. And that's where we need leaders to step up and step back in, because that's the way you actually move the country forward. If people will just ask not what's best for the party, not just what's best for me politically, not what's just best for me to raise money, but ask the real question, what's best for the people who elected me, who sent me here to represent them? What's best for the country as a whole? And how do we get to that conversation? And so it's all about good governance. We had a great chat with former Representative Rob Bishop, who I still think would be the best Speaker of the House if we could just send him back there. And remember, you don't have to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House. It could happen because he knows the procedures and he's willing to do the hard work and heavy lifting of using the procedures of the House, of Congress, to do the things that will be most beneficial to the people of the country. And sadly, I'm telling you, if you walked in to 435 members of Congress and started going through some of the procedures, as Representative Bishop said, most of them, their eyes would glaze over, or they would have a very confused look of, oh, that's not what I ran for office to do. No, I ran for office so I can be on cable news and I can do really pithy tweets and I can have big battles with my Democratic or Republican opponents, depending on which side of the aisle they're on. But that's not the job. So we have to get back to a real job interview for our elected officials. Not debates, because we're not electing debaters in chief. We're electing people to govern. And that's a very different kind of interview. We're going to get into that over the course of the next couple of days. As I've been thinking through, how should we be going about all of this? How can we best showcase those who are serious about governing and those who are simply interested in a platform for their own political pursuits or their own personal power and pocketbook? Those are different. So let's have a different kind of conversation about it. So we're going to pick up with that as we move through the week. Also, tomorrow we're going to feature former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, who will be in Utah, down at Utah Valley University tomorrow. We're actually going to broadcast live from Utah Valley University tomorrow. So stay tuned for that and be ready for some really interesting conversations. It will be fascinating to see former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan's view of what has just taken place. And he was one who was both a policy wonk and a policy entrepreneur. He was an idea factory guy. And rather than just sit from the cheap seats and complain about what was or wasn't happening about funding the government, he actually had a plan. Even when he was not Speaker of the House, when he was a member of Congress, every year he put forward a plan. Because that's what you're supposed to do when you're governing. And so we have to start looking at all of that. If you missed our last segment, we had Megan McArdle on talking about the Affordable Care Act. We talked about the promises that were made on the front end in terms of how it would increase savings. for citizens of the country, how it would reduce costs. And there's been some areas where it has been successful and many, many areas where it's completely unraveled and failed and actually caused care quality to go down and costs to go up. So now those all need to be fixed. But how do you do that? There's only one way: good governance, and people who are willing to have a good governance kind of conversation. So you have to ask the hard questions. You have to actually listen. You have to do rigorous assessment of what is the desired outcome, and then what have the results been. Because until we get to that kind of serious conversation, then we're just playing politics with a bunch of bumper sticker slogans about this party wants to do that and take away your health care. That party's going to drive us into oblivion and be subservient to China. And we just end up with all that kind of stuff. Nobody needs that. That's not governing. That's politics. And so we want to start a real conversation, like the conversation we just had with Megan McArdle. If you missed that, go back and check out the podcast a little later on this afternoon at kslpodcast.com, because we look at it just rational, reasonable, look at the data. What do the results tell us? Do we do better? Do we do worse? Do we need to change? Do we need to tweak? But you can only ask those questions if you set your politics down long enough to get to good governance. Well, that wraps it up for us on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today. Thanks for listening. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen at home on any smart speaker and in your car at 102.7 FM. This is KSL News Radio, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. Partly cloudy, we're at 64 degrees, KSL's top story. As the jockeying begins among Republicans hoping to become the next House Speaker, Utah's congressional delegation is one card shy of a full deck. KSL News Radio's Lindsay Aerts with the story.
The man who just left the seat, former Congressman Chris Stewart, says he's feeling two main emotions watching the ousting of McCarthy.
I mean, it's just sad to me. It's just sad and frustrating to watch what is happening back there. And the second emotion is I want to be back there. I want to go back and fight. I want to go back and engage some of these guys and ask them, what in the world are you thinking?
Stewart says because there were 8 Republican ousters, he knows his vote wouldn't have changed much, and he hopes it won't moving forward.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine how I'd feel if I couldn't be there and it was decided by one vote? I mean, that would be a nightmare.
Stewart says he thinks Jim Jordan and Steve Scalise are the frontrunners to lead the chamber, but isn't ruling out anyone else getting in. Lindsay Aerts, KSL News Radio.
KSL News Time 3:01. One of Congressman Patrick McHenry's first acts, an hour after becoming temporary speaker, he threw Nancy Pelosi out of her Capitol building office. Pelosi was off in California. She was at Dianne Feinstein's funeral when she got the email, "Be out by morning. We're going to rekey the door." She'll move out when she gets back to Washington. Pelosi says, "Office space doesn't matter to me, but it seems important to them." 2 representatives say they want to be the next House Speaker. Maria Chaleos is live at the KSL National News Desk.
Jeff, Representative Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan saying they want the job. The two setting the stage for a battle between conservatives next week in the House. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell telling reporters for either man to succeed as Speaker, there needs to be a change in House rules.
To do that job, you have to get rid of the motion to vacate because it puts whoever the Speaker is in a hammerlock of potential dysfunction.
He says hopefully a speaker will be in place next week. President Biden today expressing his concern over the chaos in the House. Among his concerns, funding the government and sending more aid to Ukraine.
The majority of the American people still supported Ukraine, and the majority of the members of the Congress, both Democrat and Republican, support it. So I don't think we should let them gamesmanship get in the way of blocking.
The president also urging Congress to move quickly on a new bill to fund the federal government. Mourners in San Francisco are lined up to pay their respects to Senator Dianne Feinstein. Feinstein's casket is draped in an American flag in the City Hall Rotunda. She was San Francisco's first female mayor before being elected to represent California in the Senate for 6 terms. She died last week at the age of 90. Live from the KSL National News Desk, I'm Maria Chaleos, KSL News Radio.
Utah-based Qualtrics is laying off 15% of its workforce. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe explains.
Qualtrics was recently acquired by a Silicon Valley tech investment firm called Silver Lake. That all-cash deal was worth $12.5 billion. Now the company is cutting 780 jobs from its workforce. An email from the CEO, Zig Serafin, says these changes are necessary to capture the massive opportunity in front of them. He also says that this will impact employees at all their offices, but it's not clear how many people here in Utah lost their jobs today. At the same time, the New York Times reports that the CEO, Serafin, was paid over $540 million last year. Amy Kobabe, KSL News Radio.
Qualtrics is probably best known for administering online surveys, but they also provide companies with market research tools. It's the company that propelled Ryan Smith to the Utah Jazz Owners Suite. He sold much of his stake for billions and used that money to buy the Jazz. Ryan Smith is still the executive chairman of Qualtrics. The risk factors for attempting suicide can be found in people's genes. Mental health experts say that helps them provide earlier intervention for people who are struggling.
A study involving the Huntsman Mental Health Institute discovered 12 DNA variants that are associated with risk of attempting suicide. While no one gene causes suicide, the study found that people who have more biological risk will have higher chances of attempted suicide when combined with other genetic and environmental factors. Professor of Psychiatry Anna Doherty explains what they'll do with this information.
Our next step is to really try to translate this information to the clinic.
She says this data will help clinicians know what to look for in patients and how to help them to hopefully decrease overall suicide rates. Alessandra Harris, KSL News Radio.
More women would get annual mammogram screenings if only it was more convenient. Well, Intermountain Medical Center in Murray is working on that. They're expanding screenings to Saturdays. Now, some people don't go because they're scared. Don't be, says this radiologist.
We totally understand the anxiety and the kind of nervousness that screening mammograms can entail, but the benefits of catching a breast cancer early, I think, far outweigh those fears and anxieties.
That is Dr. Eugene Kim of Intermountain as we begin Breast Cancer Awareness Month. KSL News Time 3:06, we begin the afternoon rush. Ricky Meese is here. What's going on?
Hey, Jeff, we have a new accident in Parleys Canyon, westbound to I-80, not far from Mountaindale, but it's already out of traffic on the shoulder. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Thanks, Ricky. My Minute of News is on the way next. Stay right here.
Made to Shine. Real stories from Shane Company customers.
So last week, my boyfriend said, I have a surprise for you. And I totally thought he was going to propose, but it was just tickets to a baseball game. Then, during the game, Will You Marry Me was up on the big screen, and he was down on one knee holding the most beautiful engagement ring. It was so sparkly.
Our expert jewelers set every center stone by hand, so you'll shine forever. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
It's time for Bullfrog Spa's biggest hot tub and swim spa clearance event of the year. Visit the show barn at Thanksgiving Point this week to get up to 40% off Bullfrog Spa's 2022 clearance models. And special financing is also available. Come see our customizable, easy maintenance, and energy-efficient hot tub and swim spa clearance models today. Don't wait. This clearance sale is only Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in the show barn at Thanksgiving Point.
Bullfrog Spas. Peaceful body, peaceful mind, peaceful home.
The country's largest used RV show is back and better than ever. Come find the biggest used RV selection in years, October 5th through the 7th at the Shops at Southtown. We're bringing in a massive range of used RVs from 6 locations in 3 states for this event. Shop used travel trailers, fifth wheels, motorhomes, toy haulers, and more all on site. Plus, find even more used models online at countriesrvshow.com. You'll find used RV pricing starting as low as $10,000, along with a huge selection of of used RVs, find new RVs straight from the factory already discounted for fall. Plus, all remaining 2023s are at fall show pricing. Strike the best RV deal of the season with no payments until 2024 on approved credit. Not to mention huge trade-in offers on your current RV. Then check out our Hunter's Corner just in time to kick off your hunting season. We'll also have consignment RVs at private sale prices backed by dealer support. Don't miss your best chance to extend your fall camping season during the country's largest used RV show. 3 days only, October